Sabbath-Keeping Bees and Sabbath Instinct. Written by Sławek Gromadzki. Some time ago back in Poland, I had the privilege to translate a series of health lectures by an American physician, Dr. Sang Lee, who shared with us a mind-boggling discovery about Sabbath-keeping bees. Later on, he repeated the same story on 3ABN TV. On the basis of his studies and observations, he was inspired to believe that when in the beginning God created a perfect world, Adam and Eve as well as all the animals, he gave them something he called a Sabbath rest instinct. It means that not only Adam and Eve but also all animals instinctively, or naturally, rested on each seventh-day Sabbath according to God's own example, Genesis 2:1-3, and his commandment, Exodus 28:11. Unfortunately, when sin appeared on earth, it introduced pain and death with associated fears and chronic stress, thus leading to a gradual eradication of that natural Sabbath instinct. Nevertheless, Dr. Lee believed that in spite of this negative effect of sin, in some animals, especially those that managed to live in a peaceful, free from dangers and pollution environment, this Sabbath instinct could have been preserved. He said that some time ago he was invited to Brazil in order to present a health seminar for a group of Adventist pastors. And when during one of them he spoke about the Sabbath instinct idea, one of those Brazilian pastors told him that he knew a certain beekeeper from the Amazon rainforest whose bees never worked on Sabbath. When Dr. Lee heard that news, he got very excited because although he had suspected that there could be some still existing species that managed to preserve the Sabbath instinct, yet he never found any proof for that. So, he was exceedingly happy and grateful to God that his assumption was now proved to be correct. Together with that pastor, they got into a car and drove to the center of the Amazon rainforest to see that fascinating phenomenon. When they arrived, they met the beekeeper, who appeared to be a very kind and humble man who was living in surrounded by a beautiful nature house without glass windows and ate only fresh, unprocessed plant food straight from his garden. He led a very simple way of life, and with his kindness and innocent appearance, he immediately aroused sympathy and trust. When Dr. Lee arrived there, it was still Sabbath, so he wanted to see with his own eyes that the bees were really resting. And sure enough, although there were many hives in that apiary, there were no bees seen around in the field. He was very excited about it and wanted to learn as much as possible, so he told the pastor to ask the beekeeper to open one of the beehives so that he could see if the bees were there. The beehives were made of empty tree stumps, and on the top, they were sealed with a lump of clay. Encouraged by the beekeeper, Dr. Lee put his ear to one of the holes made in the clay, and when he did that, he could hear a clear buzzing noise made by bees inside the hive. It was amazing that none of them was trying to get outside, although it was a very sunny and bright day with plenty of colorful flowers around. Then Dr. Lee asked that man when the bees stop working and start their Sabbath rest. The answer he received made him even more thrilled, as the beekeeper answered that the bees always stop working exactly at the sunset every Friday. It was so amazing. Bees keeping the fourth commandment and resting on every Sabbath beginning from the sunset on Friday, exactly as the Lord commanded in his word, Leviticus 23:32, Genesis 1:5-14, Mark 1:32, Matthew 28:1. Intending to demonstrate that nothing could stop the obedient insects from observing the Sabbath rest, the keeper made a large opening in the clay part of the hive. Through that opening, Dr. Lee could now see thousands of bees resting in the hive, and in spite of the disturbing noise and damage, they kept on staying there. Only a few of them came outside but returned after a very short time. It was such an incredible experience to see the bees remaining in hives throughout the entire Sabbath, although there were so many flowers outside and so much work they normally love to do. Dr. Lee was also told that if someone wanted to move these hives, it could be done only after sunset on Friday, as otherwise, it would cause a big problem. The next day, on Sunday, Dr. Lee visited that place again in order to check if the bees were working this time. And he wasn't disappointed, as all the same insects were very busy in the field collecting pollen and working very hard all the time. That Sunday, Dr. Lee wanted to take some of those extraordinary Sabbath-keeping bees with him, so the keeper started catching them for him, doing it with his bare hands and encouraging also Dr. Lee to do the same. He explained there was no reason to be afraid because the bees were stingless. That was another amazing discovery about those unique bees. Apart from keeping the Sabbath commandment, they were stingless. In the meantime, Dr. Lee called his friend in America, asking him to do some research and find more information about those unbelievable bees. And his friend found out that the species was known to entomologists. Although they did not recognize their amazing Sabbath-keeping abilities, yet they provided information about stingless bees from the Melipona species in Central and South America that maintained a weekly work cycle. The honey produced by them is very expensive in Brazil because it has exceptional taste and medicinal properties. Dr. Lee was given some of that unique honey and shared it with his mother, telling her that it was a special sweet gift from God produced by his friendly stingless and Sabbath-keeping bees. Normally, bees develop stings because they need them to defend themselves. However, since they lived in a safe, peaceful and clean environment, which was more like the one God created in the beginning, there was no need to develop stings. And because from generation to generation they were living in that very friendly, stress-free environment, they also managed to retain that amazing encoded by God natural Sabbath rest instinct. Other animals lost the same instinct, simply because they were constantly under the influence of fear and powerful stress, which has been known to cause gradual eradication of certain natural reflexes. Obviously, as sincere Bible students and believers, we don't need any extra evidence to support the validity of the Sabbath commandment, because the authority of the Word of God is more than enough for us. However, it is so exciting to know about the existence of some animal species that seem to be a living proof that Sabbath rest instinct really exists, and therefore it had to be encoded in the beginning in all living creatures, including us. However, the fact that some animals still seem to rest on Sabbath shouldn't surprise us so much, because as a matter of fact, the fourth biblical commandment embraces not only men but also animals. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. 6